Please help me welcome again Benjamin Joffe. Sorry.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. 여러분 안녕하십니까? So today's session in the morning is we're going to talk about the social web. I guess most of you are familiar with what that is. And especially I'd like to investigate what could be the evolution of social media based on what we observe today. So to do that, I actually invited a few people to help me, and you'll discover them during the presentation. Maybe just to get started, because I have a pretty unique perspective on the conference here, I'd just like to take a picture of you guys in the morning. So if you can, cheese and kimchi. Thank you very much. So let's get started. So first I introduce myself. So my name is Benjamin Joffe. I come from France, and I spent actually the past few years, there you go, the past few years in Asia. I spent about 4 years in Japan, about a year in Korea, and I've been living in China for over 4 years now, mostly working in the digital space with telecom, mobile, and internet. And I noticed that a lot of very interesting innovations were taking place there, and that gradually they were sometimes rediscovered or transferred to other markets. So noticing that, I decided to create actually a company around that idea, and this company is the one I'm running now, called +8 Star. It's basically a consultancy looking at Asian innovation to help foreign companies and also Asian companies who don't necessarily know their neighboring markets discover what are the good and proven ideas and proven innovations there. I'm also involved in a forum called Mobile Monday. For those of you who don't know, it's a forum of mobile professionals. I started the Beijing chapter, and we organize events around mobile services. I'm also involved in a company that is at the convergence of virtual worlds, social networking, and online gaming, called Simun. So about the agenda today. So first, I'll start by looking at how good we are at predicting the evolution of social media. Then I'll investigate what is the new public sphere, how this has changed over time with internet. Then I'll look at what evolutionary biology, which is maybe not that directly related to internet, what it can tell us about social media. I'll investigate a bit some philosophical ideas around the evolution of social media, and then I'll try to conclude with what can we do with that today. So first, why are we so poor at predicting how social media evolves? I don't know about you, but the first time I heard of Twitter, I was like, this is such a stupid idea. It sounded like the dumbed down version of a blog. And it was very, very difficult, I think, for anybody at that time to predict how big it would become and how influential it would become, even though it's still in the making. So I'll take a quick example. I'll maybe ask, do you have a Facebook account? So I have one, but in Korea I know Cyworld is more popular. All right, so some people. So this is the activity stream on Facebook. So when you change your status, when you do something, it shows in your friends page. So Denis here is listed as single. So far, no big surprise, except maybe for Jared, who's asking, what? You and Dad divorced? So this is some pretty new behavior that we can witness on the internet, and apparently Denis forgot to tell her son that they divorced. So it's kind of interesting, and this is kind of online behavior, and we see the connection with offline, but we can wonder, okay, maybe we can find some other ideas from what's actually taking place offline. So I decided to look at offline social media. So I don't know, who went to karaoke yesterday? Quite a few. I guess most of the people who went to karaoke yesterday are not there in the morning. I'm there. So that's what I would call offline social media. I looked at two other social media. So I live in China, so I took Chinese examples. The first one is a Chongnan cigarettes, and the other one is a Yanjing beer, very popular in Beijing. Very popular social media in China, and Korea too, I think. So let's look at what are the behaviors that takes place when you use those media one-to-one. So if you have drinks with Denis, Denis is a gentleman whom you can find on Google if you look for drinks. When you're one-to-one, easy to synchronize, behavior is pretty predictable. Well, what's interesting is that when you have more people, is not more of the same. More is actually very different. You have very different dynamics when you have one-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many. So if you have more people, already you see, if you want to cheers with a few friends, it's a little bit more complicated process, and the dynamics are different. And then when you get to many-to-many, it's a lot more complicated, and there's also a lot of different dynamics. Also works in karaoke. So in karaoke, a lot of people listen, some sing, depending on the size of the group, more or less sing, and some take pictures too. So the conclusion of that is that basically with early instances of social media or innovations, it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen when you have a larger number of users. So you cannot really judge new services by their first iteration. Another thing is that we can really learn a lot from emerging behaviors. The difficulty is that with social media, there's a lot of noise on little signal. So the difficulty is really to identify where is the signal. Now let's look at the new public sphere. You might be familiar with this graphic, which basically shows a lot of internet services arranged, like all our kind of social media services, from wiki to blogs to social networking to like video sharing. On that graphic, at the center is the brand, because it's the point of view of a PR guy. But in one of the questions of this session was, are we forced to participate in social media? And I'd like to introduce this pretty old concept called the panopticon. It's a prison concept from the 18th century. It works like this. You have a tower in the center, and you have cells all around. And the effect of that is that the guys in the cells feel that they're being watched all the time, because they don't know if somebody's watching. So it creates a sentiment of an invisible omniscience. If you make a parallel between the social media and the panopticon, you realize that we're pretty much in a kind of digital panopticon, and you are the center. So it's not just you using social media to like spread your information or whatever about you, it's also social media looking at you. And if you were singing yesterday, maybe some people took pictures of you, and maybe they're already on the internet, and maybe you don't know. Most probably you don't know. So that leads us to what I call the dark age of transparency, where basically everything you do, and I think President Obama discovered a few days ago, that everything you say, everything you do is recorded and can be seen by anyone. So it might sound like a bleak future, but we could also think whether privacy was maybe a momentary anomaly between the life in the woods and the life in the future. Obviously, this guy wasn't really happy to be put online. He actually threatened to sue the photographer if the picture would be put on the internet. Obviously, it didn't work. Some examples from Korea you're probably familiar with. On the left is a picture from a user of a video broadcasting service called Africa TV in Korea. And this girl was like talking on a channel to maybe a few people, broadcasting whatever she wanted. And then she kind of forgot the service was on and went to bed. So it's a pixelated picture on the left. On the girl on the right, you probably know as well. Her behavior was highly criticized on the internet. In China, where I live now, there's also this phenomenon happening. It's called human flesh search, where people try to track down individuals, find all their private information when they feel that their behavior is not appropriate. So it's called, in Chinese, the renrou sosuo. And there's already a few famous cases related to like cruelty to animals, marital affairs, corruption. And actually, it's so important because China today has the largest number of internet users in the world. It's so important that last month, a movie was released on that topic called Invisible Killer, a story of an affair, and a lady commits suicide. And the investigation is about understanding why, and apparently she was kind of pushed and pressured by internet users. So I'd like to practice a small exercise of a human search at Lift Asia. So we're all here, so we'll have to, let's see what we can do. So I took some pictures from the Lift Asia website. So if you recognize someone on one of the pictures, please raise your hand. So can you search? Can you recognize people? Yeah. Okay, no, not too bad, not too bad. Have you noticed that this guy didn't want to be recognized? Have you noticed that there was a cat? I didn't make this up. This was somebody's icon. He wanted to be under that identity. So that tells something about how people want to represent themselves and protect their privacy as well. To show and highlight even better how online and offline are not separate, I actually took an example, a little bit weird, related to Twitter. So you know Twitter sounds like very, very much online. Well, this is a Twitter machine. So with this machine, it's actually a pretty big machine, you can do like this. You can Twitter offline on the road. So it's quite interesting. So you can send a message and then it gets printed on the road. It's very good for helicopters. They see very well. So this was actually for a campaign for, against cancer. Then about public place, you maybe have heard of those cars with cameras on top. Those cars are the Google Street View cars. They go around, they take pictures, and then they put everything online and you can find your way. Well, some countries are very sensitive to privacy issues, and one pretty famous for that is Japan. And they considered that this was invasion to privacy because you could see into people's houses because the camera is quite high, higher than normal human being. So you could see into people's houses and you could sometimes recognize people. So it's interesting to consider what basically is the public sphere. This is a startup that won a startup competition last year in Europe. It does facial recognition on video. Means if I take a video here, and if the technology advances, that could recognize every one of you and associate that with other pictures or other videos it finds on the internet. So you might then ask yourselves, what's your country's definition of a public place? Because this is pretty important, might be pretty important to you. And privacy is being constantly redefined. So since as you can see, you're involved anyway, I have a picture of you on my camera. You can as well be part of the process and help redefine this. So now moving on to what evolutionary biology can tell us about social media. So it might sound far-fetched, but I'll take a pretty old example from the 19th century with Charles Darwin. So Darwin, when he was young, went on a trip on a boat for a few years and visited some islands, especially Galapagos Islands, and visited Australia, encountered some kind of interesting species, and from that he realized that maybe because they had so different ecosystems, there could be some fundamental relation between those species, like a kind of common ancestor. So he got those ideas, he wrote them down, published a book, and became pretty groundbreaking. But what's interesting was when you look at Asian markets and how they're positioned regarding the reference, which is generally the US, you can see that Japan and Korea are a lot more advanced species, a lot more advanced markets, with 3G penetration on the y-axis and internet speed on X. So actually, it's even said that Japanese phones suffer from Galapagos syndrome, too complex to survive abroad. Even the inventor of iMode, Takeshi Natsuno, said that they're like the endemic species that Darwin encountered on the Galapagos Islands. So they look at the negative side, but what's interesting is that if you think of it as kind of techno-Darwinism, it means that if you observe advanced Asian countries, they're a very rich field for observing new services and new behaviors. You might not realize because you live here, but if you travel, you'll see the differences. Another interesting example from biology is a gentleman called Robin Dunbar. You might be familiar with the Dunbar number. So I'll give a quick definition. The Dunbar number is the limit of the stable relationships you can keep basically in your life. Dunbar studied human groups, villages, tribes. He studied also animals and realized that there's kind of part of the brain that's related to like social relationships. And he calculated that on average, humans have a limit about 150. So it's kind of interesting when you relate that to social media, because that means that social media is basically limited by the human brain. So human brain is evolving, but that's where we are now. So how about philosophy? Can philosophy tell us something about the future? So there's some researchers looking at behaviors on how basically the global internet and global intelligence can be used. There's actually, one of them is a Korean gentleman who used to work at Oh My News, and another one who actually talked a couple of days ago at Blog Talk. They are looking at one is looking at the planet-sized brain, the other at the social brain on sharism. I'd like to give a couple of quick examples. First one is from Amazon. It's a kind of sub-service of Amazon called the Mechanical Turk. It's called artificial intelligence, because basically it looks like AI, but the guys working are humans. Because for some simple tasks, humans are a lot better than humans, like comparing pictures, translating short phrases accurately. Humans are a lot better. So you can dump a lot of tasks, put a little price on it, and people would do that for you. The second company, called Convenient.info, helps you search on the internet, not just one keyword, but let's say you want a list of all the, I don't know, racehorse breeders in Jeju Island. You ask them, and they'll find it for you. They make a list, and they bill you by the hour. This company is based in Sri Lanka. Rent-A-Coder is a place where you can find software developers. You describe your project, and you describe the skill set you're looking for, and then the coders build, and you can see the history with previous projects, and they can be anywhere in the world, in Egypt, in Romania. So this is leveraging the human brain, but for like simple tasks, in separate tasks. I gave a try at leveraging the human brain to recognize this picture. So on this service, you can put a picture and ask people, what is it, or whatever you want. So I guess you know what that is, because we're in Jeju. But what did netizens and internet users say about it? I hope nobody speaks Portuguese in this room, because the most popular answer is in Portuguese and is actually inaccurate. There's a real answer that works here. With reference, one is in Korean, the other is a reference to Wikipedia. It's accurate. So it shows that the planet-sized brain still needs some work. But what's interesting is that even though it's not perfect, already social media on Twitter are tools that you can use to plug into people's thoughts. So I follow a lot of stream of thoughts of interesting individuals, one of them being this person called Howard Reingold. And he's a big advocate of trying to educate internet users to make them smarter in the use of the media rather than mobbier. He wrote a book called Smart Mob, describing online, offline behaviors of groups. So the idea number one is that we need to improve our handling of those tools. And that's good for today and tomorrow, but how about the day after tomorrow? So for the day after tomorrow, it's a little bit difficult to predict. But recently, across some readings, I came across this gentleman called Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. He wrote a book called The Phenomenon of Man in 1959. He's a philosopher, a priest, paleontologist, geologist. When I read his book, I was like, this is about Twitter. This is about social media in 1959. So why is that? His idea was that as human evolve, intelligence is going to evolve as well, and we're going to move towards something he called the noosphere. So first the Earth forms as the geosphere, then living species evolve, biosphere, and then thoughts and conscience evolve, and that's the noosphere. This is the graphic kind of highlighting this, going from the beginning of the physical universe, energy, to matter, to life, to thought, and his idea is that this would converge toward a point called the omega point. And I think somewhat we're on the way between man and the omega point today. But we're just on the way. We have just scratched the surface of something really mind-boggling. So all this is very interesting and can give us some idea about what might happen later, but what can we do today? So to summarize a bit what I've said in the previous parts is that social media, when you read traditional media about social media, very often you read that this is hype. So they mostly look at companies and valuations, but generally don't look really at the underlying phenomenon. Social media tools are evolving. What was popular 3 years ago has been replaced by something more advanced, a different species. So you have to understand what they can do for you. You don't have to use them, but you have to understand them. And you have to use that to improve critical thinking and pay attention to emerging signs. See how this can help you. And as I said earlier, in any case, you're involved. Unless you live on a very, very far distant and disconnected island, you're involved. There's pictures of you, there's videos of you, there's texts of you that you put online, but that other people put online, talking about you, showing what you're doing. So if you want to have, I'd say, some control over it and a more pleasant transition towards the future, you need to be involved to redefine what is privacy. You need to be involved to redefine what is accountability. All of you know that in Korea, a person was arrested for blogging about the economy. So that's pretty surprising for blogging, right? And at the end of the day, even though we're called, internet users are called netizen, you're not a netizen by default. You have to earn your title. So I hope this will help you think about social media in maybe a different way and get you involved in making it better and towards a more interesting evolution. Thank you very much. 감사합니다.